The journey begins. Look, Finley and Raelif are there. Ackland pointed to the man and the elf who had just emerged from the trees. They had their heads close together and looked to be in deep conversation. It seems they found one another already. Well, they look cozy, Elisha said with a trace of surprise in her voice. I wonder what Raelif sees in such a... She quickly bit off whatever she was going to say and amended it to, such a young man. Finley's intelligence, Declan responded tersely. I'm betting Raelif's met his match there. Elisha blinked, but to Ackland's relief said, Yes, you're quite right. Raelif does admire intelligent people very much. It's just that elves are not quick to befriend anyone, not in mortal time frames anyways. Raelif has always made instant decisions as to whether he likes someone or not, Ackland pointed out. He and I became friends almost as fast. Elisha wisely said nothing and kept her expression studiously blank. People, especially his family, had remarked upon the quickness of their friendship, assuming that Raelif had ingratiated himself because Aquilin was the king. The nobles had guessed all sorts of ill intent, not the least of which was social climbing on Raelif's part in seeking him out. But they were wrong. Aquilin had no doubt that being friends with the king had played some role in Raelif originally pursuing the friendship, but Raelif had never treated him as a king, but as a person first. He'd had to impress Raelif to accept him. Later, Raelif had admitted that he'd played it cool so that Aquilin would pursue him back. Only after getting to know you did I realize how out of my league you were. Raelif had laughed as he had quaffed wine and threw a friendly arm over Aquilin's shoulders. Being Sun King didn't alert you to that, Aquilin asked dryly. I couldn't care a whit about you being Sun King. It doesn't mean that you have merit. I mean, yes, it has its privileges to be friends with a king, but I assure you that I would not want to be friends with you simply because of that. I would be friendly, if you understand my meaning, but friends, no. At your back, loyal as the day is short and the night is long, no. You earned that, Aquilin, all on your own, Raelif answered. His cheeks were stained with the warmth of wine, quickly, as if he'd realized he'd spoken a little too openly. Not that I am worth all that much, but you are. Aquilin had replied softly, I do believe you are worth all that, Raelif. And Aquilin had never regretted their friendship. Raelif was close to him than a brother. Raelif was what he'd always dreamed of a brother being. But perhaps that was unfair to Veslin. Veslin was a lot older than Aquilin. Aquilin had been an unexpected child of their parents. Second children for the Arave were rare, especially for elves as old as they had been. So when he'd come, it had been a celebration. And since he was the younger of the two, he'd had less responsibility. Some would say he'd had no responsibility, except what he'd chosen to take on. And some would say that he'd chosen to take on little. Veslin had already been an adult when he was but a babe, so for him to be chosen by the sun to be king, what a blow that must have been to Veslin on so many levels. The brother who never should have been, the brother who was doted upon, the brother who never was pressured to be anything but a beloved child. No wonder Veslin resents me, Aquilin frowned. Who wouldn't? I am too unforgiving of his flaws, for I have so many myself. He would not even have me be put out to check on his son's safety, like I am doing now. I must be a better brother. He shook himself from these maudlin thoughts. He should be grateful for the closeness he did have with Veslin, and with Raelif too. Maybe circumstances had soured whatever could have been between him and Veslin on some level, or maybe simply their personalities had always split them apart. But he'd been inordinately lucky, and others he'd found to plug those gaps. Blessed, really. Looks like Snaglak brought Helgrim. Declan nodded towards the others converging on their friends. Helgrim had been hiding from view behind the big orc's body as he trotted behind him and Glom on his pony, who was called Hammer and Tongs, or just HT for short. Ackland's heart leaped at Declan's voice. The young man had barely spoken since he'd requested Naramin, in perfect Katir, he'd noticed, to help him. His seat on the horse had been so good that Elisha had commented upon it as they'd ridden here. "You spend a lot of time in the saddle, Declan?" she'd asked. "No," Declan had answered succinctly, deep in his thoughts. "You ride like you've been born in the saddle," Ackland remarked. "I've never ridden before," Declan said. Both elves had exchanged a glance. He could see that Elisha was as stunned as he was. Declan's head turned slightly, catching their surprised glances. Declan had mumbled, "It is Naramin. She's doing all the work." Naramin tossed her head happily, as if to confirm the compliment. In fact, as they kicked their steeds into a faster pace, so that they would meet with Finley and Raelif at the same time that Helgrim and Snaglak did, Aquilin noticed that Declan wasn't using the reins to guide Naramin at all. Perhaps he was using his legs. But Aquilin had this feeling the mare simply was in sync with Declan, so much that she knew where he wanted to go. It was much the same with him and Arendriel, and Raelif with Silverell. How foolish of me to think of it just as an elf trait. I cannot wait to learn more about humans, more about my shadow. Snaglak happily greeted Declan as they all reached Raelif and Finley. "Trodlod so mad, Declan. You big time him. He come on hands and knees to get me." Over Snaglak's chortling, Declan said, "That's good. He must have moved fast. I didn't expect you to get here so quickly, since you had to look for Finley first." Snaglak patted the side of the Naki's scaled neck. "Glom got sent. Glom take us here." At that moment, the Naki's very long tongue snaked out and aimed right for Finley. There was a crack of lightning as Raelif interceded between them. Glom let out an angry hiss, and the frill around his neck stood up, showing the poisoned barbs as he retracted his snaky tongue. "Get your Naki under control." Raelif glared at Snaglak. He nearly took a chunk out of Finley. Finley grasped Raelif's form. "It's okay. Glom wasn't going to hurt me. I mean, he would like to eat me, but he won't." Looking over at Snaglak, he asked, "You promised him food if he found me, yes?" "Ham." Snaglak tipped his head to Helgrim, who dug out a whole ham from his saddlebags and gestured for Finley to take it. "You'd best feed him, lad," Helgrim said. "He needs to know he'll be rewarded for finding you, even if it isn't you in his stomach." Raelif was glaring at the Naki with slitted eyes, not convinced whatsoever that the Naki wouldn't have eaten Finley whole. Acklin had never seen him so protective, except perhaps of himself, but Finley moved without fear in front of Glom and took the ham from Helgrim. The Naki strained on the reins for it, but Snaglak held him firmly. Finley stood a foot away and held the ham out, but didn't quite give it to him yet. "Glom?" Finley said the Naki's name softly but firmly. Finally, the creature looked away from the ham to Finley's face. "Thank you for finding me, Glom. Here, this is for you." He offered Glom the ham. The Naki carefully took it from his hands. "I saw that lick," Raelif muttered and wagged his finger at the Naki. Evidently, the creature had licked Finley's palms as he had taken the ham. "That's all you get, or into the void with you." Unrepentant, Glom chewed the ham only a handful of times before swallowing it mostly whole. "Good, Glom," Snaglak chortled. Recovering from his ill mood with the Naki, Raelif gave Aquilin a rakish smile and said, "Well, well, well, this looks like a party. I do hope I've been invited." "If you consider going to the ruins of the human city a party," Elisha said a little repressively, "then I suppose you're right." "Chicago?" Finley perked up. "Why are you going there?" "We are going there," Declan said authoritatively. "We need your navigation skills, Finley. I know coming with us tonight might interfere with your game." But before Declan could say more, Finley was waving that problem away. "If you're asking, then it must be important." "Very important. My brother, Sarkasson, went there last night and he didn't return," Elisha explained, her face paling again. To Aquilon's surprise, Rayleigh and Finley exchanged a quick glance as if this wasn't news to them. Oh, have you spoken to any of the separatists, perhaps? They might have seen him, as they are often very active in the ruins, Rayleigh suggested. Elisha strangely pinked. I have reached out, but I don't think we can wait to hear back from them. Besides, they've indicated that they think something might have come through from the Underdark that is frightening the Leviathan. I can't imagine what that could be, but no need to explain, girl, Helgrim said as he reached down and patted HT's neck. The sturdy pony paused in his chewing of grass to give a whinny of pleasure. The ruins are no place to be, even at the best of times. How did you get roped into this, Helgrim? Aquilon asked. Snaglack needed a ham, Helgrim shrugged. And when I heard that Declan required both Snaglack and Finley with him, I knew something was bubbling in the pot. He brought up his right hand where a dark red jewel was set into the pauldron. Similar to a Ridwin, this was a sending stone that allowed the dwarves to send messages to others who had a receiving stone. And don't worry, Finley. I'll send word to Lily about the game. We'll reschedule. Finley nodded. Yes, I'm so sorry about the trouble you've gone through to... lad. They'll eat and drink their weight in my inn tonight, and then do it all over again in the park when you hold your game, Helgrim scoffed. Thanks, Helgrim, Finley smiled broadly. Besides, and here he glanced over at Rayleigh, I think I want to work a bit more on the scene with the big bad. I have something special planned. Rayleigh smirked, only once, but said nothing. We are in your debt, Finley, for doing this, Aquilon said as Helgrim spoke to Lily. I would offer you nothing, Finley said with a shake of his head. You owe me nothing for this. I'm happy to help. You are too kind, Finley. I will remember this. Aquilon inclined his head. He would remember it. While his shadow was very skilled, he knew this to his bones. Finley was not a warrior. He was going into danger to help them, to help his family. We will make sure that you are safe. While he was saying this to Finley, he was promising this to Declan. His shadow understood what he was saying and gave a faint nod. We are truly grateful for the help, for as I said, the ruins might be even more dangerous than usual. Elisha then told everyone of what she had learned from her sources in more detail, and why her brother had gone to the ruins in the first place. If I had gone back to the palace last night and heard Darkassen's concerns over the Leviathan, could I have stopped this foolish expedition he went on? Aquilon thought grimly. But he was wrenched away from those grim thoughts as, again, neither Finley nor Rayleigh looked particularly surprised by what Elisha was saying. He wondered what was going on there. Evidently, they had gotten up to something that day. In fact, both of them glanced back at the woods, then towards one another, and then towards the party. I didn't see the rift to Illithor in Chicago, though, Finley said after she had finished. Yes, but Darkassen knew that the one you did see wouldn't be reopening, Rayleigh reminded him, it being under the dome and all, so he had to go someplace where he knew there would be many rifts. I suppose it is logical, then, that he would go to Chicago. If there was one rift to Illithor, there might be others, and that's where the majority opened. Finley tapped his chin. Yes, logical indeed to think you could reach Illithor from there. Rayleigh looked strange for a moment. A mixture of longing and dread crossed his handsome features. On the one hand, while I'm glad you reported what you saw, Finley, I really wish you were wrong about it. Well, isn't he? I mean, Elisha looked between Finley and Rayleigh. I saw his sketches of the city he glimpsed, Rayleigh said. It is Illithor. Aquilon frowned deeply. That is dire indeed, if true. While the Kindred no longer dwell there, Vex is said to have left powerful magics to guard the city. Magics which are not working as they should. Rayleigh pursed his lips. Maybe that is how the Leviathan broke through. If Illithor was found, then things are definitely not as they should be, and then, well, who knows what happened. But if the Leviathan are mucking about near Illithor, then... Aquilon's stomach clenched. He could not shake the fact that the Leviathan's appearance on Earth was his fault, his failure to do or not do something, or many things. Then what? Elisha was pale as milk. Beyond the great magics that are supposed to guard Illithor, Helgrim broke in, It is said that if anyone attempts to enter it, then the Night King will know. And he doesn't like sharing, does he? Finley guessed. No, lad, he doesn't. Helgrim stroked his beard and muttered, while the Leviathan sticking their coils in Illithor is bad enough, for an Arve to do it. Aklin felt a wash of cold go through him, but also something else. His parents had gone on a peace mission to the Kindreth and had died on it. He had never gotten a straight answer as to why they had done this. Why seek peace with a people no longer there? The Kindreth were long gone from the top levels of the Underdark. To find them would have required his parents to delve into the layers of the Nighted Plane. Danger would have lurked around every corner. The sun and its attendant power would have been out of reach. His parents had undoubtedly brought sunstones, but they were no replacement. Yet they had pursued this insane course of action for what benefit? He had no idea. And they had died in the dark for nothing. Had they reached the Kindreth? Had Vex destroyed them? Or had they died from one of the many dangers the Underdark held? Before the Leviathan, he had been certain that his great and powerful parents could only have been taken out by Vex himself. He'd been so certain of it that he destroyed the night elves that had dared to enter his realm without hearing a word from their lips. Why was I so quick? Why didn't I ask them why they were there? Why did I not restrain myself? But his grief and pain had risen up in him upon seeing their white hair and red eyes like a tidal wave, skulking into his empire, trying to slip through as if he wouldn't know the moment they passed through the veil. Well, wouldn't Vex know just the same when Darkassan crossed into the Underdark near Illithor? Would he turn his face up towards the surface at that breach? Would he march with his Kindreth against the Arve? Would another war start? We should not delay any longer, Aklin said grimly, which had Declan glancing over at him concernedly. I do not think there is any time to waste. No longer was it just his beloved nephew's life at stake, but it could be so much more. If Vex senses Darkassan near Illithor, no, I must stop this before it starts. You can ride with me, Finley, Raelif said, just as Declan had opened his mouth likely to offer. I'm not very good on horses. Finley looked a little uneasy. Michael has offered to teach me, but... He shrugged. No worries. Silveril is gentle as a lamb. If you are half as good with her as you were with Glom, you and Silveril will be quite happy together, Aklin assured him. His best friend lightly threw himself onto Silveril, who greeted him with a happy toss of her head. He held his right hand down for Finley. The young man took it, and Raelif lifted him up onto the horse behind him. Aklin noted that Declan watched all of this carefully. Now, where do we think Darkassan would have gone to look for rifts to Illithor? Aklin asked. The Pedway, Finley answered without hesitation. What is that? Aklin asked, frowning. It's a system of underground tunnels and bridges that link nearly 40 blocks of Chicago's old central business district, Finley explained. It covers over 5 miles, darkest places in the city. If I were the Leviathan, I would have the majority of my rifts linked there. I remember hearing about that place, Raelif said with a creased brow. While the protectors went down there a few times, the truth was that it became too dangerous to fully clear out. Another reason to reclaim those ruins, no matter what the Separatists think. Aklin nodded slowly. I recall this myself. All the cities with their underground subway systems were problematic. It encompasses 5 miles? Alasha pressed a hand over her chest and her eyes widened. How will we ever find him? Glom find, Snaglak suggested. I don't believe we have another Ham, Raelif responded dryly. Both Snaglak and Glom looked disappointed. Do you have something of Darkassan's on you, Alasha? She nodded and reached into a pocket, pulling out a rawhide necklace with a purple stone attached. He hasn't worn it in some time, but we made these together. I would wear one and he would wear the other. Raelif took it from her. He closed his hand around it and let his eyelids drift shut. Yes, this will work. When we get closer, I believe I will be able to hone in on his location. Then let us ride. The sun is already well past its zenith. Aklin said, and lightly kicked Arendriel's ribs to get the horse going towards the ruins of Chicago. They kept the even white stone roads of the Arave for as long as possible, winding their way along the edge of the lake. They didn't speak. Every one of them were simply intent on riding. Aquilin leaned forward over Arendriel's back so that they were a more aerodynamic design, and the horse flew faster. He had to get to Darkassan. He had to stop this disaster. The wind whistled in his ears. Declan kept pace beside him. His shadow mirrored his posture. Elisha and Ralif were next in line, and Snaglak and Halgrim brought up the rear. They made good time even when the road ran out. Until the ruins were fully reclaimed, and maybe even after, this land would not be completely safe, and no Arave roads would lead there. Rifts would always appear more often there, as the veil between the two plains was always thinner after many rifts had been opened in one place. But the concrete and asphalt roads of the humans were still present. "This is Lakeshore Drive," Declan told him as the buildings started to loom up ahead of them and blocked out the sun. They rode in stretches of darkness and then sunlight. His heart clenched every time a shadow fell. "I used to love driving along here with my parents. They'd take Finley and I into the city for shows or dinner. There were tons of good restaurants and just lots of life." He was surprised at the amount Declan had just said, but he knew then that there must be great emotion underneath it to cause his shadow to say so much. "Is this the first time you've been back since the war?" Aquilin asked. Declan gave a sharp nod. "There was no reason to come." "The Separatists would disagree with you," Aquilin pointed out. "My brother reported to me that they are often in the city, and just as often are dying there. They're holding on to the past, but it'll become a dream soon enough, one they won't even remember clearly any longer," Declan remarked. His mouth flattened then, as if what he'd said displeased him somehow, or distressed him. "Memory isn't reliable." They had to slow down as the amount of hulks of rusting vehicles became thicker on the roadway, and they had to thread their way between them. Aquilin kept a sharp eye out. He noted that Declan did the same. There was nothing that his shadow did not notice. "We should take the Fulton Street exit," Finley called up to them. There was a rusted sign, partially hidden by vines, that said, "Full." Aquilin imagined that the rest was behind the greenery. "That will lead us to the business district where most of the entrances to the Pedway are." "I'll do a location spell when we reach there," Ralif offered. "We'll find him," Elisha murmured, her knuckles turning white in the reins of her mount. "We will find him." "We will, Elisha," Aquilin soothed her. She gave him a grateful smile. He had to believe in what he said. He needed it to be true. To fail again was too much to bear. As they threaded their way between the cars, Aquilin was keenly aware of all living things around them, especially dark things. But he sensed no Leviathan lurking, or any of the other creatures that had taken up in the ruins to nest and hunt. However, he did sense humans. "Humans up ahead," he hissed and held up a hand to bring everyone to a stop. "Come out," he called. "We know you are there." "It is your king," Elisha added. The humans, who had been hiding behind and inside of vehicles, emerged into the sunlight. There were a dozen of them with rifles and swords, which were mostly useless against the creatures that inhabited Chicago. They wore clothing that bore strange designs of brown, tan, and black that made them somewhat meld into their surroundings. "We've actually been waiting for you," a woman said to Elisha. "You're Lady Elisha, right?" "I am?" Elisha's horse danced beneath her as the human approached. The woman had dark brown hair that was tied back in a ponytail. "Kara sent word that you might be coming." "Kara did that?" Elisha's cheeks flamed and her voice changed, becoming softer and sweeter somehow. "She always knows what I'm going to do." The woman gave a brief nod, as if that was a very good description of this Kara, and added, "She said that you were looking for Lord Darkassan?" "Yes, have you seen him?" Aquilin asked. The woman's eyes were obscured by sunglasses, like Declan's were, but he felt her gaze swing to him. She gave another nod. "I did. Last night, when I was on a recon mission, he went into the Thompson Center. I didn't see him come out. And he hasn't been spotted coming out any of the other buildings either." The Thompson Center has an entrance to the pedway, Finley said. The human grimaced. If he went down into the pedway, you might as well turn around and go back to Lightwell. What? Why? Elisha demanded. The woman looked grim. Because no one who goes down there lives. I may write and record this story, but there is an entire team behind getting it from me to you. You already know Mathia Arconiel, who paints the beautiful covers. These covers really show what the story is about. A lush world, gorgeous characters, magic, and friendship. Cover designer Sylvia Frost takes the artwork and turns it into a cover with text, shading, and more designer tricks. Next, there's Jonah, my audio editor. When I send the audio to him, he's the one who cleans it all up, takes out the strange pauses, cat noises, and such. Kat runs the YouTube and Spotify channels. She schedules the episodes, runs the community posts, answers comments, and is generally the producer. Without these people, The Night Prince wouldn't be an audio story at all. Even if I had the time to do all of these things, I wouldn't have the knowledge. If you want to support the team that's bringing you the story you are addicted to, consider joining the membership at wraithrain.com. That's how I pay everybody. I'll post a link in the notes, and we truly appreciate your support.